Hello everyone. Today's talk is called Trajectories of a New Kind. And whether this is a new type of, let's say, reality or a newfound sense of kindness, regardless, we shall explore the trajectories of a new kind. Now, I want to take you back to a moment where you can visualize yourself to simply be an awareness to a room. Let's say right now, wherever you're present, you're not just your physical body, you're the whole room that is aware of your body. So when we see that man has the ability to consider, and in that consideration reality shows itself, it is very important if you are being inconsiderate to certain things. And so you need to see what is in your proximity of reality. That means that I won't begin talking about things that are not real to you if you don't have a reality of it. And what that means is that nothing will serve you. My voices will be hollow unless you choose to extract the value and really see what they mean. You choose how to hear them. And what that really means is that you might, if I choose to only learn Chinese, for example, and not learn French, I would be in a situation where I wouldn't understand French people when they talk to me. So their reality will be different, for example. So man is an individual being, and every person has their own unique sense of reality, but also an ability to very collectively be present among all. So what that means is that all those different species who were fighting for survival of the fittest realize that they have something in common, the presence of existence. And so as man exists and all forms exist, life becomes simply a more greater observance of this movement. So it's as if movement in existence has now learned to look at itself, and so man is here. Now, we sometimes think, what is it that, for example, the ape could not visualize, but now we know, and similarly, man cannot visualize, but we will know soon. So, in a sense, where is the transcendence of man heading? Well, the trajectories of a new kind really show you how the way you're thrown into reality really dictates your purpose. What that means is that, for example, if you're brought up in a certain culture, you begin taking up those beliefs and re-understanding who you are by constantly breaking, saying, okay, I'm not just this idea, I'm the ability of being aware of all these ideas. Now let's see who else I am, or what else I am, right? So it's the sense of an existential search where you're no longer looking for a lane towards the sea. You are kind of drifting with a very clear sense of emptiness in your reality. And emptiness means space. So space can very simply mean absence. So you are recognizing that the I don't know sense of your reality, the unknown aspects of your reality, all those things that you thought were pushing you out of control and were the chaos and the anarchy, in actuality was simply how your reality was being shifted based on nature's movements. So what that means is that naturally you're growing into someone else, and so don't think you're going to be the same person. And what that really means is that your task is with the personality, with the sense of self, with who you believe you are to now, to completely get engaged in that person's world. So what that means is get completely engaged in your world. What that means, again, could very playfully be that you might have, done the same routine job every day, but there was one moment in that day where you could have done something different. Every minute of your life, you have in an instant, you have an ability to change your role. And so simply how the role changes is that this collective intelligence, this observance, which is considered an individualized body, begins to be aware that it is its own conceiver. So it's an existential awareness based on a cyclical, let's say, phenomena in life that, in a sense, we are awareness. So we are playfully the creation of many planes of conception. But we need to understand it will eventually be our own conception. Because when man finds his cage to be the realm of the temporal and duality, you see that he sees his being always being free, uncaged. So a lot of times language is creating certain technologies for man's advancement and the advancement of physical reality and the blooming of it. However, at the same time, it is a structure. And so when you create a structure, you might have created a very nice structure, but it might in the future be taking up the space for the new. So existential allowance is very important because your sense of self changes. You will see that who you thought you were is no longer the same person after you come through this experience. It's like every moment in that experience reassociated you. In other words, you in a sense realize, no, I am not just this person with the limitation. I am one also who has the limitless. And what that means is that you're diving into your inner dimensions and in a sense seeking for what clarity means. So if behind your eyes, this was the door to a mansion and you open that door, you'd just be going in and being like, where is clarity? You're just looking for clarity. Wherever she may be. So it's very important to have that significance, to recognize that your eyes are more than they can ever be based on what you're paying attention to. So what I mean by that is that if you're in one room of the house, don't think that's the only room. In a sense, you must have the ability through direct experience, through your innate intuitive knowing, to guide yourself for your personality to then detach naturally and you jump back into the stream of dynamic states of awareness. So what that means is that man is recognizing that there's this collective sense of consciousness or the collective sense of intelligence where he can go into this dynamic in his liquid bodies and then solidify back into any personality you want. So if you're considering yourself, if you can write yourself as a character in a book with a certain personality, that is a choice of creation for you to be seen that way by yourself. What that means, you have free will to a degree that it's beyond free will. So it's very important to be aware of that, because we don't want to draw clouds and think that they're actually clouds. We want to see that because we're in a dualistic world, because there's an infinite spectrum here, we have the choice to be a collective view of any aspect of the spectrum. And what that really means is that if you know that the things you really need in this life can come from within you, there is nothing external reality can say. So it's very important, because you in your transcendence, in your awareness that you're being a new sense of your own intelligence, you are in a self-communication, which is like a fantasy, reality-shaped image type of ordeal, in which you're looking through, but you're not really there. So what that means is I can look at the ocean, but does that mean I'm in the ocean? No. However, I do get a possibility of visualizing myself how it will feel and activating certain realities. So what that means is that you need, similar to how the mindfulness that many Zen masters talk about, that we need in thought in regards to having a sense of emptiness and awareness to our space when we move through it, you need to have a sense of mindfulness in your multidimensional presence, in your subtle realities. So the pilot of consciousness is recognizing that he's a simultaneous acknowledgement of all separation. Immediately he knows this from the minute he's conceived into a form that doubts even, or can doubt. So even before you know. However, you will see that how you maintain your subtle realities is like not thinking too much. And in a sense, when I say not thinking, the minute I say the word not, you're thinking about the word not. You're thinking, right? So the problem is speech in how the teacher communicates. So you will see that all the gurus knew it was an existential communication. It was you recognizing the value of your life's moment. Right? And that was the enlightenment, that was the passing of the torch of one sense of physical consciousness to another. And look at how integrated, how much trust they had. What I see a bit decreasing is man's trust in the self and the ability of the self to transcend beyond limits. In other words, back in the day, they might have trusted things that many scientists or many people rationally are saying that, it didn't make sense, they were believing in illusions, right? However, the intensity of their involvement with what they perceived was much more intense than many people now. There's an emergency going on in which people are not activating themselves. They're not putting their intensity in their involvement in life. And this is simply because you feel life is in a certain way, so wait a minute, I'll be in this way. We must not be hindered by thought. The biggest problem right now is man's communication and his awareness to his communication. Because once he becomes aware of the communication that is self, he is not only that self. You get a wisdom that encompasses all that can be individual. You become a pillar of existence, transparent in your view of all views. And trajectories of a new kind will show you that if you have trust in the way you've been thrown into this life, you would also see that that same trust will continue on. So for example, some moments when the present moment's realities get really overwhelmed, or sometimes they don't really, but when if a reality, if let's say some shocking thing happens to me, let's say I get in a fight or something, you know, I will immediately leave that internal space, because you get a consideration of reaction based on imagery. So when you get angry and you try to rationalize why you got angry, you're looking at imagery, but that imagery is not in the present moment. So you really need to be mindful in thought. You need to be mindful in existential sensitivity. You need to see every movement, every walk. What is it transitioning and changing from your state of awareness? And you know, I thought people are, you know, many kids nowadays, I feel like their attention is being guided towards gadgets and screens more than actually the screen of reality in which they're present in. So when I see this, I see that these kids, it's not that it's wrong, I don't have anything against it, but I see that it's as if the next generations born after me are all tuning into and becoming much more like specified beings, where they can really tune in and in one certain way really bring in a lot of inspiration, right? Because their attention is being trained based on how the cultural and how society is really moving, in a sense, in regards to what it's demanding from its technology use. So the users of technology also require self-awareness, but that's for another talk. So once you become aware of self, clarity does not become something that you get or you do something, or it's a dualistic relationship. Clarity is simply an observance, and you will see that there's nothing more than this observance. It's an existential observance. And when you do, formed significance transitions from always being the object. So in other words, you thought only your body was important to you, but actually you see, no, your whole moment of being is your body. And gosh, your intentions have been tuned to an individualized self, so all your whole energy has been going not on the collective acknowledgement of your world, but by its individuality. And so you find yourself to be that separation that is always separated from others, but in a sense is also loving them as well. There is no one you cannot hate without also seeing the idea of love there, and vice versa as well. Because what that means is that once you acknowledge another human being's imagery and in a sense assign a certain archetypal value just naturally by looking at it, you will see that when there's a shift, when there's a change, you have a choice to allow reality to change or not. What that means is that your illusion is not always an illusion. There are moments throughout the day where your awareness suddenly peaks, for example, you know. Rumi has a quote, he says, "Don't go back to sleep, the dawn has secrets to tell you." He's talking about how that time in the morning is very significant, you know. And again, there's deeper mystical meanings, of course. Because those poets, those very wise men who wrote sacred hymns, realized they did not write it. Their greatest observance of life did. So it was all that is. And it's very interesting because, like, the entrance is sometimes also the exit. Never forget it. The design of some rooms is at one side of it, there is this one room that is, how would I say it? Like there's an entrance and then there's an exit on the other side of the room. But some rooms are just empty spaces. So what that means, you go into this reality, you're like, oh, it's an empty room. So always, the whole way is back. So that's why we see many people talking about the archaic revival, or just in a sense, how we are going back to our roots. It's because that's what happens when the tree gets to its peak. The tree gets to its peak and it's like, oh gosh, I'm just a tree. So it just very playfully, you see the hollowness of this reality because the entrance and exit are the same in regards to how this dimension functions. But again, these are realities of conception, so how you choose the reality really suggests how you're comfortable into transitioning and in a sense flowing with an allowance and with a trust, a beautiful trust in life, you know? Man must let and learn in a sense, from life by allowing life to show him how living is done. So when I didn't know how to live, I didn't really see books. I kind of went into nature and I'm like, all right, let's see how life's doing it. And you see that it's not doing anything. So you really understand the beauty of a still mind in a moving world. You see the significance not being in terminology and what you thought the terminology was in a sense communicating, but in a sense the greater vision that was simply the fading of the clouds of your imagination. In other words, you acknowledge existence beyond concept. And so this entrance and exit idea is very important. So I want you to visualize there are times in man's life where he feels as if he has reached the end. There's nothing here. And he's like, gosh, it's as if I've taken a dead end, you know. But you will see when you go in a room and there's nothing there, you get such a certainty that the entrance is the exit. So once you really get to know, once your hand hits the bottom of the pool and you feel the bottom of the pool, you quickly just you come back up knowing that you have accomplished that which you wanted to. And you're, I guess, youthful, exuberant. This hollowness translates into you seeing that you are putting the meaning in things. So there's a natural sense of emptiness because you begin seeing that each individual, it's like they have their own view. Each person is their own way of looking at life. So these many different ways of looking at life at times come into what they call culture and society. Oh, we're similar ways of looking at life. So they get more of a collective and solidified physical acknowledgement. But at times if they leave society, they will immediately be away from ideas of solidification. So they would eventually become more transparent and become more collectively conscious. So it's a preference of you as a being, really, if you want to live in a city or not. It's a taste in manifestation of form. But the greatness of you comes from the observance beyond form. It's a formless presence within your knowing. It is similar to that sense of knowing where you have been looking outside for questions, and questions have been just waking you up at night, and you've been looking, and you suddenly see, wait a minute, where is the intensity of my search for this question coming from? And it is from you. So man does not just play games with others, he plays games with himself by seeing life as a game. And if you still see it as a game, that's a certain state of awareness. But there's a awareness beyond the game. So in other words, it's beyond the audience. It's beyond the setting. It's beyond the player. It's just that moment where one man sees the entrance is the exit, and so reality is free. Let your life and its flow show you the patterns of thought which you're meant to work with. In other words, there are moments where I wake up in the morning and I just become very observant, and I allow the day to just happen. So I don't think I'm tired, I don't think what, I just flow. And as I'm flowing, suddenly I see there's some realities which I can, in a sense, act upon, individualize, and in a sense go do. And in a sense, when I go do those things, I also have always an observance that I'm not I can immediately detach from it. So I am so aware of another sense of reality that this reality, based on existential fluctuation, if it becomes irrelevant, I will move towards a greater point of significance. And that's simply just like walking, you know, and trying to like not step in the mud when you're walking in the park peacefully. You need to realize that your greatest companions are your simplest and complex metaphors and how comfortable you are with them. You know, there's a very huge importance because man, in his existential search, is understanding more dimensions to his being. That means not that just your thoughts are going to explode and change, not that everything's going to, in a sense, shift, but you will see that the shift is simply based on a sense of you knowing how else you have seen yourself. So it's a beautiful thing where you're like, oh, your whole life you've been thinking you're just this personality, but you are many layers of energy. It's as if many cloths are poured and so are placed, and so they're weaved together in ways beyond conception. Reality is weaved beyond your conception, and when you recognize this, always appreciate the work the needle has done. And so recognize the needle to be your present moment and how you are connected to all which you are considering yourself individual from, because it is an integrative and omniscient view that conceives an individuality. How could there be anything else? Because when we think an individuality is not from a greater collective sense of consciousness, we recognize, or in a sense we're telling ourselves that we have more faith in our blindness than in our sight. Because sight could be gone, so it's not real. You know, you see, man's idea of looking for something real is a flaw. It slows you down. So what that means is that if you're drawing the craziest art, and if I just come to you, hey man, is this real for you? You know, or in a sense, if I just like try to use the cultural connotations in the word real to change the scenario. So the whole thing that I was just saying there is simply that greed is a choice, and that choice can amplify in first giving you how the illusion of success is really what you want. So in other words, you think your desires are what you want, but once you reach them and you have them and you're doing them, you see it's hollow because you are a changing temporal being. Never consider a career without considering your death being the last job you're doing here. So in other words, what that means is that recognize that, gosh, I only have a certain amount of time. So it's very important I become aware, I enjoy every moment, I become grateful. Gosh, they told me be grateful at the dinner table. Gosh, I should be grateful all the time. Because gratefulness is an existential awareness. You're walking the park and seeing that life is living. And could there be any better poetry than the present moment? Realign yourself and let your pattern not just be a pattern, let it be a flowing pattern that is infinitely changing. Trust your sense of existence. In other words, before you could even doubt what you were going to do next, what is that trust that is physically keeping you here? Do you know? I mean, look at the gravity of the situation and see what is the core of your reality. Why are you having these images? Why are you your unique way of thinking? Just observe it and your mind will be blown by, in a sense, of an instant of a recording of your whole life. What that means is like your life in an instant is suddenly absorbed, and you have moments of understanding throughout this reality that you are looking through a moment that is encompassing all other moments, and so there cannot exist when all is here. A sense of transparency gives your shape a freedom from itself, because you remember how you are flowing in greater ways. And so the intelligence of man in this world which he has considered himself separate of is never just the intelligence of man. It's the collective vision of the roots in which you see the pioneers knew that they must stand still for eternity in the soil so that the roots could be firm. So in other words, Mr. Within very playfully, kind of in his own way, interprets that when we see, for example, the concept of the Dalai Lama being the 14th reincarnation, it kind of suggests how one being had such an intention to do his work here that he kept coming back to it. So it's similar to how one root, which knows of its greater design, is in the soil, just in a sense, is keeping itself in the dirt still and is comfortable with the dirt so that other realities are kept. So your existential comfort, just like how the roots are remaining still and silent and present in reality, allows your multidimensionality and all your projections to naturally flow and, in a sense, grow in the way they must. Because the pilots of consciousness are always ready, because they are in the present moment. And existence is their gift to, in a sense, being an infinite expression. They know beyond their knowing, and that is why they know. Much blessings for all man is basking in clarity. Your essence is clear. The nature of your mind is clear, but you need to confront the hollowness of the stories you're telling in which you think your character's in, because the intelligence of the storyteller is what is keeping you present. And that storyteller doesn't have to be just like a limited experience of just calling it God and not knowing what it is and not going towards it and being too busy in society, you know, or calling it, let's say, the Dharma, or just whatever you call it, or whatever you want to call it. It's one of those things that you are not here to elude yourself. Do not just use words and just be like, oh, I'm happy, I know stuff. No, direct experience. Think as if there was no human being here and you were stranded in an island. Where would you go? What would you do? You would go to your most exciting direct experience where your intuition calls to you. You would see the firmness of your roots and simply be that being who knew that intellect was never in how one person communicated to another more, let's say, capably. Intelligence was the knowing that you are one. Intelligence is the knowing that all is collectively held, and that where else can your individuality look? In other words, don't worry about the grass being greener on the other side when there is no field in the way you're conceiving now. When there is no field, there's no need to create and be in a have-to condition scenario. Physical reality gives you a lot of, you have to be this way, you gotta be this way, and man is constantly fighting it and surviving, for example. Now he's finding a much more able to maintain it, so he's becoming more sensitive to other aspects of his intelligence. It's because like, it's like the claymaker just was constantly focused on just making one pot, but realized, oh, I got so many other tools I could use, you know. It's one of those things. So your ability is found in the present moment. The trajectories of a new kind are simply, or in a sense, can be simply said, is your awareness to the present moment of the flow that is dictating your ideas by your allowance for it to do so, but not in a sense that it's something outside of you. In other words, many beings of a very compassionate, connective nature, their teaching is do not try to be someone to then wonder why you're not in somebody else. Be aware and be a present moment of being, and do not have judgment. Do not have your attention too much on physicality, because if you do, you would be immediately affecting your physical form. So you will see that there are some men who with very few steps walk all over the world. And with the grace of a newfound kindness, you are your greatest treasure revealed. Do not think that there's just the knowledge that they teach in school. There is the experiential knowing that you can have by being aware of your life. And you are a being who can bring branches of knowledge. In other words, you must instantly, in perhaps just only max 1 year, acknowledge all of man's sciences very clearly, and then very quickly see what the next step is. Because the profound element in how we are present is how everything else is present also. And I hope you truly see that your sight is beyond the shapes that can be observed. Because the observer knows within the unknown. Much blessings and namaste.